Welcome into episode 459 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, 4th of July has come and gone. Free agency, the draft, has come and gone. Well, I guess free agency is technically, that never really closes, but everybody gets signed. And so now we've hit the part of the summer where it's kind of a wait and see and just more wait until September, really. I mean, there could be some shoes to drop. There could be some trades. And I see some speculation online that the trade market could pick up again at some point this summer. But right now, it's kind of the quiet time of the summer. But don't tell the three of us that or our listeners because we'll be talking all off season regardless.
Yeah, Brian, you're not selling the show right now.
Of course I am. Of course
You
I
don't
am.
need to
We're
listen
not
to us.
going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. I'm selling it like a car salesman. We're not going anywhere, despite the lack of activity. Keep it here.
Well, we do have a lot of mailbag questions, and it's so funny. There is a common theme in them that I wasn't expecting, but we're gonna get to all of those mailbag questions today. We also had over 60 YouTube comments, which I tried to go through and see if there was a theme there. Mostly that was just general hatred of the moves that they made when free agency opened.
I was gonna say people were fired up and not
Oh, yeah.
in a good way.
Not in a good way, no. Which we will get to. But yeah, we did have opening shifts. I don't know if Brian, did you want to start with yours?
Sure. Also, can I just quickly say before I get into the opening shift, one thing I've also been thinking about lately is it's kind of refreshing for everybody to be hating on the Bruins and have such low expectations because for the longest time, it's been expectations and not being exceeded. So maybe going into a year with not high hopes can pay dividends for us. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. But to that point, Elliot Friedman was on 32 Thoughts, his podcast, and he mentioned that the reason why the Bruins 2025 free agency class may have been a little underwhelming and conservative, and I know the 5 years to Tanner Jeannot isn't the most conservative play for that type of player, but just in general, he mentions that a lot of the players they brought in were shorter term deals, and while the Bruins only have $2 million thereabouts in cap space right now, Elliot Friedman talked about how the Bruins wanted cap flexibility, and that they will get cap flexibility over the next couple of years with an eye towards the 2026 free agency class. Now, with the 26 free agency class and the cap continuing to rise, I see it playing out more like we saw this year, where players will re-sign with their more recent team because their team has gotten more cap space. So I don't think you'll see free agency as we've known it next year or even the year after until the cap flattens out for a little bit. But that said, it kind of just tells me that the 25-26 season for the Bruins, they're looking at it as a get right season. We got to get our shit together, and we really want to try to reestablish structure and yeah, identity. You'll hear that word, blue collar, whatever. But I think they're trying to get their act together, and if that means that they will their way to a wild card spot, I'm sure they'll be dancing on Causeway Street in the executive offices, but I don't think they're expecting that. I think they're just trying to get back to basics and again, just get their shit together. And then once they do, I think they're just going to try to fill in the missing high end pieces after that. Now, I think free agency is less likely. It's probably going to have to be the trade market or something like that. But in doing so, they know they have James Hagens in the wings, uh, professional analysts, and most fans are pretty high on Boston's 25 draft class for a change. So I think they know they have some higher end skill prospects, which is new to them. And the NHL roster is a little bit underwhelming right now, but I think, like I said, they're just trying to get back to basics and then they'll supplement around it, I think maybe around this time next year. So last week, like all of the comments Bridget was talking to, I was very reactionary and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? I just think they looked around and saw the market.
And don't forget that I had my own rant.
You did.
Totally separate to free agency.
Yeah, you did.
I got a little bit mad last episode too.
And Scott, I'll sum it up like this and just throw it back to you. But I just feel like right now the Bruins, I just think they're actually kind of being self-aware right now about where they are and that they can't put the cart before the horse. In addition to that, the market hasn't been great that summer for high end player movement. So I think they're exercising a little bit of patience, and that's different for Bruins fans to get used to because we're so used to them, trying to get back into the fight. And that's just my read on it right now as we stand. The summer's not over. Maybe they do execute a trade for a higher end player. I'm not expecting that, but yeah, I think next year's a get right season, and then I think they're going to try to go from there.
Okay, here's my counter. Projected 2026 cap space for next summer. Where do you think the Bruins currently rank?
Well, so they have 2 million and change right now. If they were to lose Arvidsson and Peak, they'd gain back another 675. So call that just under 9. And then I think the cap's going up another, I'm going to say like 18 million, 17 million. I'm not sure where that ranks though.
You're right around it. They're projected to have 19.9 million, which would be the second fewest in the NHL.
Really? Wow.
So there's my counter. How much flexibility have they really left themselves?
Yeah.
Now look, other teams have a lot more roster holes to fill. Like this is the Bruins with, I think, 18 players signed on the books for next season. But I don't look at their situation and think they have a ton of flexibility moving forward. That they certainly don't have more than like half the league. So, I mean, that's basically enough money to sign one premier free agent and not like lose anyone else on your current team. Like not trade anyone away this deadline, keep Zacha, Mittelstadt, all that. And it's like, if you think that's all this team needs to be a contender, then I guess that's good enough, right? Like if you think, all right, James Hagens is ready next year, and then they go sign like a $10 million free agent, and now they're a cup contender. If you think that, then okay, like they can do that. I'm just very concerned that they are further away than that, and don't have the flexibility to really do anything other than that.
Yeah, and Friedman did say because when he said that, Scott, I looked it up afterwards as well, and I came to the same conclusion as you, where it's like, because when I heard Friedman's comments, I was like, oh, the Bruins must have a handful of RFAs and UFAs after next season, and I think they had two, like I think it was Arvidsson and Peak, and now he did say over the next few seasons, so maybe if we carry that into the next off season, maybe, but then he also mentioned a 26 free agency class, so it's that kind of seems moot now. But yeah, ultimately you're right, Scott. Like I think that if they're solely looking at the 26 free agency class, I think it's a flawed outlook. I think you want to augment and supplement your roster probably through the trade market in addition to your younger kids coming up over the next couple of years. So yeah, I don't totally get the wanting the cap flexibility or seeing the cap flexibility compared to others around the league that I'm with you on that. But I think generally speaking, I just think their philosophy is using 25, 26 as a get right season. And if, like I said, if that happens to end up in an 8 seed, like I said, I don't think they're expecting it, but then they'll be pleasantly surprised. I just think they're trying to get their act together, and then they're going to infuse the youth that they've recently got over the next year or two, and then also, like I said, supplement a higher end talent or two. Because we know we know they still need a top 6 forward. This is outside the prospect of James Hagens, right? They still need a top 6 forward, a true top 6 forward, and they still need a true, in my opinion, top 4 right shot defenseman. So yeah, I'm just saying I think ultimately the Bruins aren't looking at this as like, why was their free agency class so underwhelming? Why didn't they get Best or why didn't they get Ehlers? Because you know what? They know that those two players are big. They aren't solving their problems right now. And I think that they just realize, you know what? We need to get back to our basics here. And we don't need that top 6 winger to establish defensive structure. And then we'll take care of that going forward. I think that's their plan. I think that's their plan. It could be flawed, but I think that's what they're doing based off what I've seen this summer.
Scott?
Bridget has no comments on it.
Well, no, I thought that because it's opening shift, I just figured.
I think the mailbag will take over after these, so we'll just do them now.
Okay. All right. Scott, did you want to go next?
Sure. I'll go next. So mine is rest in peace to Lyndon Byers. who passed away over the weekend. And obviously, Bruins fans of a certain age will remember him as one of their favorite enforcers through much of the 80s into the early 90s. For me, like, I was too young to really remember him as a player, but I definitely remember going to halftime pizza before games and LB being all over those fight reels that they would play on loop in halftime. Um, and then for me, like, I ended up knowing LB more as WAAF radio personality. I listened to a lot of AAF in high school, especially. On my way to school in the morning, getting ready. So was familiar with him there on Greg Hill's show over on AAF, and then when I started at EEI and Entercom, AAF was still part of the family, and he was around, and I'm not gonna pretend I got to know him super well, but like I would talk to him around the hallways, and told him like I was at that time I was doing some Bruins stuff, not as much as I am now, but like told him that, like introduced myself, and you could tell, and like you've heard a bunch of these stories if you've seen them online or listened to radio the last couple of days. Um, he would just talk to anyone and like seemed legitimately interested. Like he would ask me about like stuff I was working on, and I was like, at first you're like, there's no way like Lyndon Byers cares about what I'm doing, and then it was like, oh, maybe he does. Like maybe he's just a really nice guy, and he was. Um, I've seen stories on social media of him picking up tabs. People who would run into him at a bar out somewhere and just talk to him for a few minutes, and next thing you know, he picked up the whole tab for their group. Like, um, Greg on his show has told stories about all the charity work LB did. How he would joke like he might be late getting there, but then he'll spend 5 or 6 hours there. So, um, really sad news. I think you don't really haven't heard anything negative about him. So I know like he was kind of larger than life as a Bruins enforcer. We know the way that this city embraces those kind of players, but then took on this whole new life as a radio personality who was like a true character on Greg's show for so many years, and I think became beloved by like a whole new generation because of that.
Yeah, I saw nothing but nice long tributes to him from a lot of our colleagues because, like Scott mentioned, WAAF is right upstairs from us. And obviously, when Greg
Well,
Hill,
unfortunately, not anymore. But
well,
yes,
it,
that back in the day.
technically it's still called WAAF, but it's like a Christian rock channel now
Yeah.
or something. It's not the same, but yeah. And then they were always upstairs. I actually recorded up there once for some reason. I don't remember why. And so, and then once Greg Hill and Danielle came over and some of the producers from those shows, we got to start hearing all of the LB stories because they had a lot of them. And normally they were, those were their most entertaining stories, I think. But yeah, I was shocked when I saw it because it happened on 4th of July. And the news came out the next day. So definitely sad. And we worth mentioning at the beginning here. I'll get into my opening shift as well, which is kind of connecting the two worlds that I work in, which is covering the NHL and covering college hockey. And we were having a conversation just before we started about how just kind of how the college hockey landscape's shaping up with all of these high recruits, like these guys that were high draft picks this draft and are expected to go really high next draft, including Gavin McKenna, who reportedly is it's a done deal with him going to Penn State. And I saw Mike McMahon, who's one of the better college hockey reporters. If you're looking for the college hockey insider, I would say he's probably one of the best ones. Uh,
I'll say the best.
yeah, he's a nice guy too. He was sitting next to me at the Hockey East tournament this year, and it was fun. I was picking his brain about like, hey, you got any news that I could use? But so he's reported that McKenna is going to Penn State, which Penn State has really taken off. That program has really taken off. I mean, when I was in college, they were just a club team. They weren't they weren't a D1 team. And now you start to see all the people that want to go there and play there. And there is a partial reason being they offered a lot of money to Gavin. McKenna reportedly about
Yeah.
700,000.
And coming from Terry Pagula, owner of the Sabres.
Yeah.
He's a very rich man and a Penn State alum who financed, if not all, the vast majority of their rink.
Yep.
And is now financing a lot of their NIL.
Yep. So they just threw a bunch of money at him. Apparently the next highest offer he got was from Michigan State, and it was like 200 or 300,000. So 700,000 obviously sounds better. It's still nothing compared to what he's going to get in the NHL someday. But it actually kind of bothers me. I'm not going to lie. I won't do this rant now, but it changes the landscape of college hockey, and I think in a negative way with the money that's involved. So I always just thought, it was about getting paid for your name and likeness, like selling jerseys and different things like that. But it's gone way beyond that in terms of the financial situation with the players and stuff. So that's a whole separate rant. But we were also talking about, we still don't have an answer on if James Hagens is going back to BC or not. There hasn't been a definitive answer either way. And just a few little rumors of other guys that might land kind of near us in Hockey East. I had heard, I have a source that told me that Roger McQueen's actually in talks with Providence College. So maybe he goes and plays there. He's a guy that got picked top 10 in this draft and had a hell of a day on draft night. He was the one we were talking about, had the best time. We went to Disney and everything. He's a good player. I'd be happy to see him come to Hockey East.
He flew to Disney, went on all the rides, and got back in the time it took them to make 5 picks.
So that's crazy. So Penn State offered,
maybe a slight exaggeration, but
it was an exaggeration. But he did do it all before the end of the first round.
Yeah.
So Penn State reportedly offers Gavin McKenna $700,000, which, Scott, I'm going to have to ask you to try to confirm this, but unfortunately for BU, I think they only offered him a year's supply of Raising Cane's, which wasn't, $700K.
Would have been enough for me. I mean, yeah. I don't know what this kid wants, but I mean, you got to have priorities, like money or Raising Cane's.
But big picture, right? And Bridget mentions McQueen possibly going to Providence. That's the first time I'm hearing of that. We also talked briefly that nothing outside of very small and very small rumors of potential interest with Caleb Dennoyer in Boston College at different times over the last probably 6 months, and he very well may still go back to Moncton. But the three of us were talking before. The CHL does not lack talent. What it lacks is size and physical maturity that you really can't have as a 16, 17, 18-year-old hockey player. But when you're playing in the NCAA and the age range is from 18 as a true freshman, sometimes 17, going on 18, like Macklin Celebrini and James Hagens and others. But the age range goes from 17, 18 as a true freshman to sometimes 25 years old.
Yeah.
So,
BC had a 25-year-old on their team.
So imagine being that 18-year-old prospect that is playing against somebody who's, 5, 6 years older, right? So the biggest challenge for these younger skilled players entering the league or entering a team system is they've got all the skill in the world, but we need to see them learn how to play a more physical, mature, man strength style of game. And the NCAA offers that. And so now with some of the rule changes, and we're just talking, you mentioned the financial element that's in play now as well. I mean, you're going to start to see a lot of these CHL players, once they've either been drafted to an NHL team, try to further their development in NCAA hockey, which will increase the skill level of NCAA hockey as well. And also for players that maybe haven't been drafted yet, but they've kind of done all that they can do at the CHL level. Like Gavin McKenna as an example, right? I mean, he had like over 2 points. I think he had a 54-game point streak next. So I can already see McKenna being at Penn State next year and lighting up NCAA, and people being like, "Oh, it's too easy for him." Well, he had a 54-game point streak in the CHL, so let's just keep that in mind. But my point is, I think you're gonna
really crazy.
you're gonna start to see, I think, a lot of these higher end and CHL prospects that have been drafted or entering a draft here start to move over to the NCAA, and it's gonna make for a highly entertaining product. Bridget, I know you think that there's a potential competitive imbalance for programs who can afford to pay, but you know what? That's what college football does, and that's a massive success. So I think while it's unfair for the Bentleys of the world and
Yeah.
hell, even BU,
Well,
like to get Gavin
Yeah,
McKenna in the game is huge.
I've heard that the Big Ten schools have the most money to offer or are willing to
yes.
offer the most money, so that could take talent away from like the BUs and BCs out here on the East Coast, because if Big Ten teams are allowed to spend more than say Boston College, who's been a powerhouse and one of the best teams in the country the last few years, that definitely changes the landscape of college hockey. So
Well, it does. I'm gonna be really interested to see where it goes. Like, I think it's exciting just to get this kind of talent into college hockey. I would also remind people these teams that have been getting the high end talent are not winning national championships. These are not that they get there, they get to the Frozen Four, but you look at like the recent Western Michigan this past year had what 3 NHL draft picks, no first rounders. Denver gets picks. They are a talented team, but also skews older than your Big Ten teams and your BU and BC. Quinnipiac won in 2023. UMass in 21 was an older team.
Is that how you say it?
Minnesota Duluth.
Is it Quinnipiac? I thought it was Quinnipiac. Is that how you say it?
Quinnipiac? That's how
You,
I
s-
say it.
I thought you said. I thought you
you
said.
said it a little bit strange.
I thought you said Quinnipiac.
People, I
Quinnipiac.
think everybody says it different, but
I thought it was Quinnipiac, but hey,
I
I
feel like
say
we're
words
saying the
wrong all
same
the
thing,
time.
but I don't hear a difference.
No, no,
But
no, 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 no. Listen to me. You said Quinnipiac, and I'm saying Quinnipiac.
you're adding a very weird emphasis on. That's not
yeah,
how I
but
said it.
you did say it like that.
No, that's what you said.
Quinnipiac.
No, no, no. No, see, you said Quinnipiac. You didn't say it the way you're saying you
Yeah,
said it.
like you said it like nip, like in the middle.
And listen, I'm gonna take advantage of this because you guys always get on me with my lavaliettes and my French pronunciation. So
Oh
I'm
no,
gonna.
wait, you have one.
That's
You have
true.
one that we haven't been telling you about too. We just let you. We've just
Oh
been letting
boy,
you
which
cook.
one? Which one?
Yoki Haru.
Yoki Haru. What did I say?
Yoki Haru.
Oh boy. Oh
I've just
boy.
let you do that for months.
So I'm gonna say Joki Haru. I'm just gonna completely butcher it now.
Joker. Joker.
Yoki.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but like,
Scott.
there's no guarantee that these Big Ten teams are just going to start winning every national title. Which I think is part of what makes college hockey great. Is like, yeah, the teams that get the most talented 18-year-olds, not only do they not always win, in fact, they rarely win. So, I think a lot of other programs are still gonna be in the mix and be very competitive and be in Frozen Fours and have chances to win national titles. At the schools way further down, your Bentleys and Holy Crosses, like those schools never really had a chance anyways. They'll get in, they'll be a 4 seed every now and then. One of them will pull off an upset, but like that's really not any different than it already was. So I think it's good for college hockey to get this kind of talent. Yeah, like you don't love the money being thrown around, but and I think there probably will be some more regulation that comes in across the board, across every sport. But I don't know, like these players are going to end up at the big programs anyways, and I think college hockey getting them, even if it takes money to get them, is better than college hockey not getting them at all.
I think something you mentioned, Scott, is true, and we talked about it this past year with Denver versus BC in the semis, and the year before in the national championship in Western Michigan. But in the NCAA, you're right. For the most part, programs seem to win. Programs, when I say programs, I mean teams that have a lot of 4-year players because they're able to come up together and have that chemistry and that elder statesman mature identity as a college hockey team. Many times those players don't go on to the NHL, but they are able to win championships at the NCAA level because they play as a unit and they're just very well structured. Whereas having the one and done high end caliber prospect, it's exciting. It could lead to a championship on talent alone in one given year, but it's not a recipe for sustainable success unless you're just replacing each one and done with somebody else the following year. So Penn
Which
State will be very fun to watch next year, and I'm sure they'll be the high end favorite throughout. But you run into a team with a lot of 4-year players, and sometimes it's all it takes because they're older and there's, you know,
and a good goalie.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I feel like Maine was like that this year. But yeah, and then you have your BUs who the whole season on our show on Nesson, it was always like who's gonna pick up the production for what they lost in Macklin, and luckily they got Cole Iserman, so they were able to do it. But yeah, that's probably enough about college hockey. That's a different show, but uh, good time to start the mailbag. And can I start this? I just want to read you um what one of the ones that I was when I was going through, I was like, okay, this is definitely completely this is something that I didn't realize people were as upset about. Um but common theme was that most of the people that sent us submissions, they really disliked the Tanner Jeannot contract. They
Wait,
didn't
and
like.
that was surprising to you?
I'm surprising that it was like every single email. Like I was surprised as much.
I'm not like the backlash that got online immediately. Like, oh my, like yeah, people hated that, and I get it. I hate it. Like, I don't get that contract at all.
So yeah, let me try to find one.
Can you
There,
can you can you start with Scott's question that he submitted?
yeah, Scott. What was? Let's see. It says. Oh, wait, did you add something in here, Brian?
No, I was just messing around.
I was like, wait, did Brian like snarkily write a comment from Scott somewhere on this document and I'm not seeing it? So I guess I'll start with the one that I see that was about it. From Ian, it says, I want to start off by saying what a difference just a few moves makes. I think, like most Bruins fans, I was riding high after the Hagens pick, and it really felt like something had changed in the front office philosophy, as if they were getting with the times and understanding they need more skill. Then we all know what happened when free agency opened, and it was a real gut punch. I guess my question is, would it feel it feel so deflating if Jeannot wasn't handed a 5-year deal? The term is the biggest head scratcher.
Yeah, I think if they signed Jeannot to a 3-year deal worth $2.5 million a year, you wouldn't be getting anywhere close to this many complaints. Yeah, it's the fact that it's 5 years, which is a lengthy commitment, and $3.4 million, which is real money. Like the couple people I've heard defend this contract, I hear, well, the cap's going up and $3.4 million isn't going to look bad in a few years, and I'm like, well, it is if he can't even play on the team. Like if he's not even a fourth liner in a few years, $3.4 million is still going to look really bad. And I think it looks bad now because to me that's third liner money. And Tanagino is not a third liner when you look at his production over the last 3 years. Like this guy scores 6-7 goals and puts up 12, 13 points. I mean that's barely fourth line production. And you're paying him like a real third line contract for 5 years. So, yeah, I think that like yeah, that taints a lot of it for a lot of people because you can't really ignore that. Yeah, I think everything else is pretty easy to understand, and I don't have any. We'll get into it because it seems like people have issues with more than just Jeannot. I really don't have much of an issue with anything else. Like Corrali, Asamont, those are short term, small money. Arvidsson's 1 year. You know, if it doesn't work, then you're moving on. And if it does work and the team's not good, then you have an asset to trade at the deadline. Like, I'm not too worried about that. It really, for me, it does come down to the Jeannot contract where it's like, you could have used that money and, maybe a little bit of money from somewhere else and like added another Arvidsson like player, like a legitimate middle six winger. And instead, you've spent it on a fourth liner who has had minimal production the last 3 years.
I will just say, and Scott, when people bring up the element of the cap going up, like that is it is fair to bring that up. I mean, right now
Yeah, but you
his
still
cap
you
his
can't have three
contract
point
is
four million dollars like tied up in your 13th forward in
no no
3 years.
no I mean that's fair, but I mean right now his contract is 3.5% of their salary cap. So I mean add over the course of his contract, that's gonna significantly continue to decrease. Now, I hear what you're saying. I'm not even totally disagreeing. I'm just saying like, it's gonna continue. That number's gonna decrease. And while it's totally fair to look at the player and not like the production, not like the contract, I'm not here to dissuade anybody of that. I myself am not a huge fan of it, but there's a small part of me that looks at it and says, I mean, none of us, if we could all predict the future, we'd be playing the lottery. Like there is the smaller chance that he turns that his production increases in Boston, and maybe maybe he plays a more defined role, and maybe he has a bit of a resurgence. He's still, I don't want to call him young, but he's what is he, 27 or 28? So I mean, he's still like in the prime years of his career, and maybe his presence can be felt more so off the score sheet than on. Like I'm just saying, like I was one of the people who, when the deal came out, I think I tweeted like, "Oops," when I saw that they signed him. But again, like as the dust settles, I look at the contract and I'm like, you know what? I will reserve a small possibility that the player becomes a positive for the team. And if that's the case, then we'll have to look back at this and maybe apologize for our initial reactions. But it definitely, if you're looking at his past production, the evidence tells us that won't be the case. But we have to leave slight room for that to be possible.
Yeah, but also you don't pay for wishful thinking. You don't give out 5-year contracts for wishful thinking that he turns it around. Like you your wishful thinking signings are 1-2 year small money, and then if they pay off, then you pay more. Right? Like
Hmm.
the Panthers claiming Gustav Forsling off waivers. Like that's a wishful thinking signing that then you end up giving a bigger contract to when he does turn it around, when he does break through. You don't go 5 years for a guy who's had 3 straight down seasons. Like I know they're not expecting him to get back to the 20 whatever goal form from 4 years ago, but even thinking like he's going to end up in the middle of those two things is like you have 3 years of him producing at this level. Like I just don't know why you would think he's going to be anything more than that. Like it's pretty clear that one season was the outlier.
Bridget, I just want to add one thing so that you have all the information to go off of here. Is that Friedman also said, because the market's at play here too, right? Like, and now maybe Friedman is sometimes a mouthpiece for GMs. I don't know, right? So let's keep that possibility open. But he did say that the market for Jeannot was more than people realized, and that there were at least 10 teams that were really pushing to sign him. And so if that's the case, and the Bruins were one of 10 teams that really wanted his services, like that is what free agency
Then
is.
let someone else sign him. Like I don't
Yeah.
know why this guy has to be a priority.
I mean, I know. Well, that's why I'm saying let's see. Like we can criticize it, but like let's see. Like they these hockey people, we have to give credit that they probably know more than we do. So I don't know.
Yeah, I
Sometimes
wonder.
maybe.
That does beg the question: what were the other offers? Like, because I have to assume this was the longest term he was offered by any of them. It just feels like that's probably what the difference was that got him to Boston rather than those other teams. I'm sure he was hoping to sign to the best offer, and so he ended up here. And yeah, maybe the market for whatever reason for him drove the price up. That we,
Which
I
again, like you don't have to win the bidding war. Like you didn't need to sign Tanner Jeannot. So I just don't understand. Like,
But
okay, fine, there's other interest in them. Why do you have to beat them all out? Like, why did you have to
because
prioritize this guy?
because I'm trying to approach this from what I think the Bruins mindset is. And I think their mindset is their goal next year isn't to necessarily even make the playoffs. Their goal is to reestablish structure and identity. And I think that I think they see him as a piece of it, whether it's in the room, on the ice, whatever. And I just think that, like, the one thing I also want to say is I see a lot of people talking about the Bolesky and the Backus signings and comparing this to that. And at surface value, face value, I get that. But the Bolesky and Backus signings were, I'm gonna guess here, were a much more significant percentage of the cap, because the cap back then I think was like in the 80s, and the contracts that they were signing were I think like 6 million or something like that. So it's not a complete apples to apples. People bring up those contracts. Like, didn't we learn from Backus and Bolesky? Well, okay, on the term, sure, but the it's not the same amount of the cap as those deals were. But if we're talking investing in a player that you don't think will turn out to be good on the ice, like, sure. But if we're talking straight cap wise, it's not necessarily a fair comparison.
It's not, but to me, the similarity is: are you committing to a player who a couple years from now is going to be unplayable, basically? Which I think is a distinct possibility. Like, I think that's just as likely as him actually producing at any kind of level that like warrants this contract.
So I want to read another aspect. This is a question from Liz. Same issue, but with the Jeannot contract, but she had a different reason why she was upset about it. So Liz's comment says, I was relieved to see someone ask Sweeney why Jeannot got a 5-year deal, with a consensus league-wide that being one of the worst deals of the day. His response baffles me. He said, the younger skill players that we plan to incorporate going forward are going to need a little breathing room. I think Tanner's going to bring a lot of that. And she goes on, can you guys explain to me how the Bruins are going to incorporate younger skill players when Sweeney just went out and signed 6 high-priced veterans for the bottom 6? He's literally just built a high-priced wall blocking the younger guys from coming up and doesn't seem to realize it.
So Scott, I'm curious your take on this. Again, if we're talking the day of free agency, I was leading the charge of being like, I am so confused by them signing all these bottom 6 guys, right? But again, you take a step back, you let the dust settle, and and Scott, I think you were even the one to mention this and directly after on that podcast. Like, let's see what the roster is in October, because chances are a few of these guys will, they'll end up in Providence or let go or whatever. So, like, the logjam, I don't think will be. I think the opportunity will be there to win a job in camp for all these people. Like, I don't think they're necessarily signing Michael Eyssimont to 100%, maybe be like in their bottom 6. Like, he has to win that job just like a Patra or Husnudinov. And if Eyssimont doesn't, then, like, they'll rid of him, like, or they'll send him to like, I don't know. And so I think Sweeney is more so trying to create, and this is what he said anyway, so it's really not guessing. But it looks like he's just trying to, it's almost like he's not bluffing, but it's almost like he's just trying to give these younger players as much competition as possible in camp. But with that said, competition is just that. It's not smoke. It's not smoke and mirrors. So they could lose these jobs. I just think that if Patra, Husnudinov, Minton, Lysell, Blumel, whomever, if they come into camp and they're the best players, Lashmelis, whatever, I do think that, I do genuinely believe that they will win the spot and that they'll find a way to rid of the other contracts. So, Scott, is that still how you believe as well?
Yeah, I never thought there was any chance that they were gonna roll out a bottom 6 that had like 4 or 5 young players in it. Like, I I think for a team that needs to reestablish an identity and a defensive foundation, there was going to be more certainty in the bottom 6 than just throwing the kids out there and being like, have at it. If you make a million mistakes, so be it. that's just not what they were going to do. Like, so if you wanted them to do that, sorry, that was never going to be their approach. That said, there's room here for guys to win jobs. Like, even with all these signings, I think all of us had at least two of Patra, Husnudinov, Minton on the roster with Lysell pushing or Merkulov or Lushmelis or whoever. Like, there's still opportunity for all those guys. In my mind, there's at least two openings, and there could be three if you push out a Beecher or an Asamont, or maybe Corrali ends up as a 13th forward instead of playing every game. So I guess I disagree with the assertion that it's a high priced wall. Jeannot is high priced. That's it. Again, to me, it comes back to one contract. Everyone else, like, your Blumel and Steves and Riley Tufte, like, those guys can be waived and sent to Providence. Asamon, if he doesn't win a spot, like, most of his contract could be buried in Providence if you waive him. Corrali's around either way. Like, he's not, no matter what, they view him as a kind of a leader in that bottom six, whether he's playing every day or in a rotation or 13th forward or whatever it might be. But there's opportunity there. And I guess my closing thought would be, like, if those guys can't beat out, if Matt Potter and Fraser Minton can't beat out Asamont, Beecher, Husnudinov, Blumel or Steves who've been career AHLs. Like, if they can't beat out those guys, then they're not ready yet. And, like, they should have more time in the AHL.
Yeah, and I think that the comment that he made about breathing room refers to Jeannot being kind of,
Bodyguard.
protecting of, say, maybe thinking more of a Lysell or a Patra, because those guys are smaller, and obviously Patra got injured in his first season and has, been trying to gain strength, but he could probably benefit from a little bit of help in that category. So that's what I thought when I heard that comment, was just as a protector of the younger guys. But I do think that there's not enough room for the people who wanted to see Merkulov and Lysell and Patra, and maybe and Minton get their chances. There's not enough space open for all of that to happen, unless there's a serious push that, by someone like Lysell. I think he once again kind of seems to be the odd man out, because I do think Minton and Patra have probably the best chances of ending up on the roster out of training camp, and then the others they would have to really push. We did have another comment about Merkulov. We have some big Merkulov fans that listen to this podcast and send us comments, because let me try to find it. I'll go to that one next because it's kind of related to Liz's question.
Bridget, while you're looking for that, I'm going to share a quote from Marco Sturm in Connor Ryan had a sit down with him for Boston.com at a Dunks, by the way, which
of course
is just like the most Connor Ryan setup for a story.
And I had to zoom in to see what Connor's order was, because I've been so curious all these years, because he's the biggest Dunks advocate. 2 caramel swirls, and I think oat milk. That's a good order. It's a good order, Connor.
So Connor asked Sturm about the opportunity that young players will have, and he specifically named Minton and Patra. And I'm not going to read the entire answer from Sturm, but this is part of it. He says, hopefully we do have some spots available, and I think it sounds like some of the guys have a really good opportunity. I really hope they grab it, because I want them to grab it. I want that competition in our lineup, especially with those young guys. I'm a big believer in that we want to play a fast-paced game, and you kind of need those young legs too. So hopefully some guys will come through. So you at least have your head coach saying, like, I want these guys to win jobs. Like, I want them here making an impact. So look, we've discussed this before. Like, ultimately, final roster decisions are Don Sweeney's, but Marco Sturm has a say in them. And if he likes what he sees from some of these younger players in training camp in the preseason, and he goes to Don and says, Don, I really see Matt Patra playing the way I want him to play, and I see him contributing, and I'd love to have him in the lineup. Same for Minton, or maybe it's all the names we've gone through: Lysell, Merkulov, whoever. You would hope that Don Sweeney takes that into serious consideration, because if you're ultimately, like, if he's forcing a lineup on Marco Sturm that Marco Sturm doesn't want, yeah, then we have a big problem to discuss.
Yeah. And so Minton and Patra, once again, kind of feels like those guys are most likely of the group and just where they are. And Patra's pretty fast. Lysell, we know, is really fast. If he's trying to get speed into the lineup, like, those guys could fit that bill. The question from Kim about Merkulov. She says, first of all, she was encouraged by what Sweeney did in the draft, but that didn't last long at all. She says, I'm so frustrated by the way the Bruins continually block their young talent. You need to give them a full season to see what you've got. Sweeney loves internal competition. Great. Have it be between all of the young guys for the few spots that are available. Do you guys agree? And that's part one. I'll get to the other part later.
I don't agree with you need to give them a full season. That's just not how the NHL works. I'm sorry, like, you don't get a full season to prove yourself. You get training camp, preseason, and maybe 5 to 10 NHL games. Like, you got to make an impact in pretty short order. And to bring this back to Merkulov, who, look, I still think has a shot to make it, but what did he play last year? 10 games, and I think he didn't have a point or maybe one assist. Like, and I think he'd be the first one to admit this. You got to make more of the opportunity. You don't get infinite shots. You don't get an 82 game sample to make an impression. Like, we can argue whether that's fair or not, but that's the reality of the NHL, and that's pretty much across the board. Like, find me a team that throws in, a fringe 22-year-old player and just lets him play 82 games. Like, you might do it with a really highly talented player, but even those players sometimes have to fight. Tyler Seguin didn't play every night as an 18-year-old rookie. Like, he was taken out of the lineup at times. Like, that's just, I don't know. To me, that's how it works. I personally think that's how it should work. Like, I don't think you get a full season to prove yourself.
Yeah, Merkulov, in just to what word am I looking for here? Not correct, because you were right, but the stats for him was in 10 career games he has 1 assist. So in the NHL, obviously. So that's his number. But the rest of this question is about Merkulov specifically. She said, instead, Sweeney brings in all these bottom 6 players and signs them to ridiculous multi-year deals. I feel it doesn't matter what the young guys do in the preseason. They aren't waiving all of the veterans they just signed. So once again, the younger players will be back in Providence. It's a vicious cycle with no end in sight. Seems like Sweeney didn't learn a lot from the various coaching candidates' comments about the development of young players. And she says, I feel bad for Merkulov. No way in hell is he going to get to play. I feel like Sweeney swindled him into signing instead of asking for a trade. Merkulov had no way of knowing what was about to go down on the first day of free agency. Do you think he goes to Sweeney and asks for a trade?
Can I just jump in real quick? No, he's not doing that. No, he did not get swindled. That, I promise you, Georgi Merkulov was not guaranteed NHL playing time when he signed a 1-year extension. Like, we don't have to coddle these guys. They know they have to fight for jobs. I think fans expect these kids to be handed more than these kids expect themselves. I think they know they have to earn it. At least the vast majority of them. Like, no, yeah, none of them are signing expecting to just be handed an NHL job.
Now, is there now more bottom 6 competition than he thought? I don't know. I mean, we don't really know the conversations that he and Sweeney did or didn't have. But at the end of the day, to Scott's point, Merkulov is anything but a guaranteed NHL player, and the numbers that Bridget read off, his NHL numbers, I know it's a small sample size, but here's the thing with him from what I've seen in the NHL is that there is a we all know this, but there's a difference in speed, not just physical speed, but speed at which the game is played between the ears, and you have to make decisions quicker, and your feet have to move quicker. So your time and space at the NHL level is significantly taken away compared to the time and space available at the AHL level. And so Merkulov has a ton of skill with the puck on his stick, but when he's in Providence, he has that time and space to make those decisions and execute those plays. At the NHL level, I fear that he doesn't have the foot speed to gain that same separation he has in the minors in the NHL. Now, he's also undersized. So, if you're going to be an NHL player, you can be undersized or you can be not the fastest, but you really it's tough to be both, right? So, if Merkulov was his size, which he is, but he was a burner, like he was like a Nathan Gerby out there who could just gain that separation, then that's one thing because then he could have a possibility at making the same plays in the NHL than he does in the AHL. Um, and I bring up Nathan Gerby just because he's like the first small player that came to mind that was in the NHL for at least a little bit. But there's other examples like an undersized player has to have that separation speed, and I fear he doesn't have that separation speed at the NHL level for his size to make the same plays. Scott's grinning ear to ear, I think, because he's a BC Eagle, former Eagle.
I was gonna
Didn't
say,
have
quick Nathan Gerby aside, not a name I expected to be talking about, but
No, and he brought up Bolesky too earlier, and I was like, I wasn't expecting that name to come up on this podcast either.
well, that's because people were talking about.
yeah, I was gonna say Bolesky I've at least heard in the last week or so.
It's not one. I don't think we've ever talked about him on the podcast before. So
He was pre-skate pod, this skate pod at least.
yes, absolutely.
May that be the last time we talk about Matt Bolesky. But Nathan Gerby, so he was at BC while I was a student at BU, and really before I started covering the team. So I was just a fan rooting against him, and we made a sign, Gerby eats baby food, and put his face on like a Gerber baby jar. Which
this is you know what? I think you were my what I do to you with the stickers is just karma for what you did back then, I guess. But I bet my Photoshop skills were better.
I will say he was he was an easy player to hate because he was so good. But I remember the 2008 Hockey East semis. BU was playing Vermont in the late game, which ended up being a very late game because BC UNH was the first game, and it went to triple overtime. And you could tell like everyone else on the ice was exhausted, and Gerby was still just like zooming around, just skating circles around people. And I was like, man, even as much as you like to hate him, I was like, all right, this is pretty impressive to watch.
Do you have a picture of your sign, your beautiful sign?
I could probably find one somewhere.
But Scott, is that your read on Merkulov too? Is that he might just be who he is when it comes to that gaining that separation speed at the NHL level, and that maybe like can he gain that at 25? Like is his acceleration, his quickness, is it what it is at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can keep working on it, and maybe he takes more advantage of his next opportunity. But yeah, like there is also the possibility that he's just a really good AHL player, which we see a lot of guys who end up as that. You can make a good living that way, and maybe at some point he ends up in a different organization and gets, a different look elsewhere. But yeah, like that is the possibility too, that, just because someone scores in the AHL doesn't always mean they're going to end up making the NHL and being a regular and making an impact. Like some guys just top out at that level, and Merkulov might be getting close to that. He's going to be 25 in October. Like, he's not 22 anymore. This isn't Potch or Minton where there's still, where you still see a lot of development runway in front of them. Like, yeah, Merkulov might be what he is at this point. again, let's see. He's going to have an opportunity. Like as we said, he's here. Maybe there aren't as many openings as people wanted, but there are still some. So he's going to have the same shot as everyone else in training camp and preseason.
And I totally didn't realize that we had so many questions about young players, which I guess shouldn't be surprising because we normally do get a lot of those. But Sam also asks, could you see Sweeney and Neely trading any of the younger players before training camp? I hate to say it, but I hope Patra gets traded so he actually gets a full season on an NHL club and they would utilize his playmaking. So basically, before that, like I just jumped to the question, but before that, she was pretty much saying there's so few holes for those guys to fill on the Bruins. Do you think that indicates that there will be a trade that, you know, because they're not going to be using those guys, they send them elsewhere?
No.
No.
I mean, I think Matt Patra's going to make the team. Like, I have him penciled in as making it. So why am I trading him? Like, no.
I think
not. He's still, I still view him as an important part of the future. And I think the Bruins do too. Giving him some competition to overcome doesn't mean they don't believe in him or they're going to trade him.
Yeah. And I do see him making this roster. Like, you look up and down the roster and he's well inside the cut line of talent, I think. But we did see him go up and down last season to Providence and bounce back, and hopefully he sticks, I think, is kind of Sam's point. She sounds like a Patra fan and wants to see him more in Boston this year than in Providence.
And the thing about Patra too is there, in some ways, when he made the team in 23-24 out of camp and he had that amazing preseason and he made the team as a 19-year-old, I think that it was a great story. I think as time goes on, it feels like him making the team that early hasn't done the perception of him among fans any favors because people have been clamoring for him to be on the team ever since. And he has been at different times, but he's also gotten injured at the NHL level a few times because he lacks that physical maturity. And I think that it's sometimes tough to remember that because he made the team a couple of seasons ago out of camp that as we speak, he's still only 21 years old. He turned 21 like 3 or 4 months ago. He's still very young. So, oftentimes players that get drafted, if they do make the NHL at all, don't even make the NHL until they're 21, 22, 23. So making the team at 19 was a great story, but it also has made him seem at times probably older than he really is because we haven't seen him consistently ever since then for different reasons, injuries, whatever.
He's legal drinking age now. I think he's 21 now, right?
Barely. Yeah, barely. Yeah. I think he turned 21 in March, I
Yeah.
believe March or May, maybe even May. But in any event, I think that's at play here too. So it's been tough, I think, for some fans to be patient with him because they saw him on the opening night roster a couple years ago, but he's still only 21. So just keep that in mind.
I would also, looking forward, I will say I wonder if there are any questions in the Bruins' minds about, long term. Can you have James Hagens and Matt Patra be two of your top 3 centers? Because NHL teams do seem to have this fixation on, like, we can only have one undersized center, like one center under 6 feet. Like, that's part of the reason the Blackhawks didn't take Hagens, because they already have Connor Bedard under 6 feet. The Utah already has Logan Cooley under 6 feet, so like they weren't going to take Hagens. And I don't think that should be a thing. Like, I think, say Hagens is your 3 years from now. Hagens is your number 1 center. Elias Lindholm's your 2, and Patra's your 3, or flip Patra and Lindholm. Maybe, like, I think that's fine. But I do wonder if there's any sort of questions about that in the Bruins' mind that could somewhere down the line lead to Patra being part of a trade, maybe to try to upgrade your top 6 on the wing or acquire that right shot defenseman. Like, I could see that down the line, but I don't think that time's right now. I don't think you have to do that yet.
Or is he penciled in to maybe convert to full-time winger in the NHL? I mean, if you have Hagens and then you have Lindholm still or Zaka, and hell, Mittelstadt's still around, and we all know Fraser Minton is a big-bodied, potential third line pivot. Like,
Mhm.
does Patra's usage do they still view him as a center with their current roster construction?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets time at wing, this year because that's where they played him a lot last year as well. So kind of one of those guys that you bump in and out of center depending on need, right? Like depending on how the rest of the lineup is playing. Do you need to shake things up? And yeah, I could definitely see Minton being at center and Patra being at wing.
And I
I,
think that's what they're looking at it. I think they look at Minton as being that bigger guy beneath the goal line. I mean, I could be wrong, and this is just my initial knee jerk reaction. But when I think of their third line next year, I think of Potter on the right and Minton at the center. I think Minton's a lefty also. Is he a lefty? So he'd be left wing. But I see that before I see Potter at center, and maybe he is at the center. I
yeah,
see Minton there.
I just think Patra's better at center. I feel like I still need to see a lot from him before I start thinking about him as an NHL winger full time, like specifically board battles and just getting pucks out of the zone when they come around the boards. Like I think he in the times we've seen him on the wing, I think he really struggles with that. So, you know, I think the things he does work better through the middle of the ice, the way he skates and protects pucks and makes plays and kind of has the vision
Mhm.
to move the puck in either direction depending on what's going on around him. So I'm not ruling out him being a winger long term. I think there's still quite a bit of work for him to do before he settles in there.
Yeah, he looks to me more confident when he's playing a center. He knows his role much more because that's just what he's been playing for his growing up and up until this point. So, and that's when you see the Krejci like plays. That's why he was getting those early comparisons to Krejci was because he was had that vision as a center coming up the middle of the ice and finding the open guy and uh, using his playmaking ability that way.
I w- I hear you guys, and I see it too. I would just say, like, as important as board battles are on the wing and the D zone, the battles beneath the goal line in the D zone are also like you gotta be a big boy there, and you gotta have man strength. So you can't get out muscled when you're trying to help out your D because those lead to direct scoring chances and scrambles in front of the net. So I guess I'm just curious. Like I don't I Minton being I Minton's a lefty. I need to confirm this, but I think he's a lefty, and if he is, then it just kind of it might jumble things for me because now,
Minton is a left shot, yes.
so Minton playing the left side. I just feel like I feel like the natural spot would be Minton on the natural opening there is right wing on that third line. I think. So Patra being on the right side, there would be more of a natural fit. Minton's the center, and then you'd have a left shot on the left side. But in any event, we're splitting hairs. I guess we'll see how it plays out. Yes, Bridget, you mentioned Roger's question. Do you wanna get to? Yeah, I got it right here. So Roger says overall, I like the James Hagens pick at number 7, but I see some potential similarities between that player and Casey Mittelstadt. Both have a similar build, similar strengths to their game, and both were even taken in similar positions in their draft classes. Can you please compare and contrast those two players and tell me if you think the ceiling for Hagens is higher? I mean, yes, I think the ceiling for Hagens is higher. I think that he was the projected number 1 overall pick for the last 2 years, and the last 3, 4 months prior to the draft, 5 months, things changed. I think people are really putting way too much stock in what was still a very impressive season at BC as a 17 turned 18-year-old center. I'll just leave it there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, just to make the comparison in terms of production at that age. So you mentioned James Hagens was a 17 going on 18 freshman, an underage freshman, should have been a senior in high school, and he was a point per game. At the same age, Casey Mittelstadt was playing high school hockey in Minnesota, and had a really good season, and then finished it out in the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers. Casey Mittelstadt went to college at the University of Minnesota a year later as an 18 going on 19-year-old and was under a point per game that season. 30 points in 34 games. Good, but not overly impressive. Listen, if James Hagens is only a point per game or even less than that as a sophomore at BC, assuming he does go back, then I think we have a conversation about, could he be trending towards being more of a Casey Mittelstadt like player? Which again, I would also remind people, Casey Mittelstadt has come close to 60 points twice in the NHL already. So it's not like we're not talking about a bust here. We're talking about someone who needs to get things back on track and bounce back, but who has produced in the NHL at a pretty good clip. But I see if Hagens goes back for a sophomore year, I see him being over a point per game. I think he's going to dominate, quite frankly. And that would be a significant step up over Mittelstadt's production at the same age. So yes, I do think there are some stylistic similarities, but I do think Hagens has higher upside.
I do too. I think Hagens, hopefully, for the Bruins, ends up on exceeding what I guess a 7th overall pick does and plays more like a 1st overall pick the way that people thought he could. And I will say, just having seen him play, and obviously having seen Casey Mittelstadt play, I don't think they play that like, to me, that's not a one-to-one comparison of like, oh, who does James Hagens play like? Casey Mittelstadt is not who would come to mind for me. I think Hagens plays stronger on the boards. I think I see him really active in trying to retrieve pucks. He is a playmaker. He's a lot of his points came on assists, yes, which is kind of what we were talking about with Casey Mittelstadt as well, and that's something they want him to. They want it to be more of an even balance and him take his own shots more often than he did his first year. I'd be really surprised if he was under a point per game producer as a sophomore, because he's going to be the guy. And I think he really, really wants to be in the NHL as soon as possible. So he feels that he has something to prove. So I expect him to have a pretty big year this year. And obviously, I think a lot of people are going to tune into to BC broadcasts who are Bruins fans, and they're going to watch him play. And I don't think they're going to see that kind of style that Casey Mittelstadt plays.
Yeah, I mean, I just it's this is before the Bruins drafted Hagens, because I didn't think there was a possibility at all. But I read the articles, I read the mock drafts, and I started to see him slide to 7. I couldn't believe it. James Hagens he's among the most prominent prospects to ever come through the U.S. National Development Program. I mean, he is in really high company over there, and it blows my mind that how much discredit Hagens got for, like I said, a very strong, true freshman year in the most mature, non-professional league of hockey that I think there probably is. And I think that, yes, he was drafted 7th overall. He fell to 7th. But as we've talked about, he didn't go to certain teams ahead of the Bruins because of some redundancy on those teams' rosters. And I do think need played a factor. James Hagens is not the 7th talent in that draft class, like, at all. And I think that as time goes on, I'm not saying teams are going to regret their choices, because the players team selected might fill their needs for exactly why they drafted that player. But league wide, I think fans and analysts and media and executives and just people in the game are going to look at Hagens in 10 years like, he went 7th. Why did he go 7th again? And I just think that that's far more likely than him being somebody who doesn't play to their ceiling. I think Hagens is Hagens to me is a shoe-in, I think, future 1C. And the only way I think that he wouldn't be a 1C on a team would be if one of the true best players in the world were on the same roster. Like and I'm not comparing the players here, but in a similar way that Leon Draisaitl is a 1C for every other team, probably besides the Oilers, is how I would view Hagens' his ceiling. Like if the Bruins somehow landed Gavin McKenna next year, then okay, I think maybe Hagens is your 2C. But aside from that scenario, I think that as time goes on, I think his future is a clear one center, and I don't think Casey Mittelstadt ever really had that anyway.
Yeah, that's if Gavin McKenna moves to center, which I think he probably will at Penn State, but it is worth noting that he's been almost entirely a wing to this point.
That's a good point. I don't know why I have so much center in my brain. He has been more wing than anything. That's right.
It's also not that we're gonna talk a whole lot about the 2026 draft, but it's interesting that like that is considered a stronger class overall and probably stronger at the top, but it's not as strong of a center draft. Like it's a lot of wings and defensemen up high. So it's definitely stronger at those positions than this year's was. But you like I think you had the 7th overall pick in the right draft for a center. And if you're that high again next year, then again, if you're one, obviously you're taking McKenna, but otherwise, like you may very well be looking at a winger or defenseman.
You know what's interesting is Matthew Schaefer missed the cutoff for next year's draft by like a week or two.
Yeah.
And so
he's so young.
I wonder if he was born, I forget what the cutoff date is, but it's sometime in late September. But if he was just born a few weeks later, I'm curious where he would be drafted in next year's draft class. I would imagine still top 5, especially if like he had a full year of health under his belt and more to be seen of him. I mean, I would imagine it would still go McKenna, everybody else, but that's something fun to play up because he's probably closer in age to many of the draft kids next year than some of them this year. But in any event, Bridget, do we have any other questions we wanted to get to?
I mean, there's plenty left, but I feel like we should save them because we're going to be doing a lot more mailbag episodes because, you know, we don't know when the news is happening now until we get to camp and preseason and what have you. So we had our really busy week. We had the draft, we had free agency, we had development camp, and now we're more into, you know, kind of taking questions and talking about stuff that we haven't had a chance to dive into more deeply because we were covering just the news of what was happening last week.
One other quick question from me to you guys is because Scott mentioned Connor Ryan sit down with Marco Sturm, and I gotta read that. I haven't seen that yet, but Victor Arvidsson and Marco Sturm had overlap in the LA Kings system, and even for a brief time last year. I mean, Marco was coaching in Ontario Reign, and Tanner Jeannot was in LA, so maybe there was some familiarity at training camp or just being in the same. I don't think they're walking the same halls. Obviously, they're in LA is not Ontario, but I just wonder, like, Marco's, he talks to people in the Kings organization. I don't know. Like, I wonder how much influence he had when it comes to some of the signings that Don Sweeney executed. I know it's Don Sweeney's job to go out there and add players for the roster, and I know Scott's mentioned that a lot as well, but obviously there's a working relationship, and I'm just curious if Marco sees something in Jeannot's game, or just I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I mean Connor did ask him about that, and Sturm said to start, I didn't bring the names up. They did. It just turned out I had them and we were in the same organization, funny enough, and that helped, especially with Arvidsson. He had a no move clause and he did it, not just because he wanted to come to Boston and have a great opportunity, but also the relationship I had with him in the past. And then he says, Jeannot is a typical Boston Bruins guy, reminds him of some of his old teammates here. He knows what it takes. He will also take care of the room. He's a great teammate and also take care of the guys on the ice, and that's what we needed. So if you are to believe Sturm, It's more these are names the Bruins were already targeting, then asked his opinion about them. I will say, like, the Jeannot as a team leader thing, this has now come up. Star mentioned it, Sweeney mentioned it after signing him. Gonna be honest, not something I had really heard, and maybe just because we don't see much of LA, you don't know that. I mean, he hasn't worn a letter. I just said, like, I had not heard people talk about him as a team leader, but now the Bruins are. So obviously they see him that way. We'll see if he does turn into that. But
Friedman said the same thing too.
Yeah.
So I did want to say before we go, we did have some questions, and I'll put the mailbag, I'll put the email up for people if you want to send them in. skatepod@weei.com. Comment on YouTube as well. We look through those. We got a few questions about potential trades because obviously free agency, the market didn't bear out that a lot of guys made it to market. So, we talked about how that was, there wasn't a whole lot the Bruins could have done because guys signed where they previously had been. A lot of guys did that. And then Marner obviously signed and trade. But we got, obviously, then that brings us to, all right, is this the final roster or is a trade coming? And people are sending us ideas because I think a lot of people aren't happy with the way that the roster looks if this was the opening night roster that they put together. So they want to see an actual top six forward addition. So we got a few questions about that. I think maybe next week we could focus on some of the trade options potentially, and ideas of packages and stuff like that, who might be available, so that though they didn't get the guy in free agency, maybe there's still a trade out there.
Yeah, and I see Mittelstadt's name in some of those. I've seen Zacha's name for like a month now, about just rumors about Boston, inquiring or listening on him. But it's just tough to see a trade where a top six guy goes out and then a top six guy comes in because, even if that Boston top six guy is part of a package, because it's like, well, now it's almost like if they're going to bring in a top six guy, you want to try to do it without giving up another top six guy. But yeah, we have to talk about that for sure as time goes on.
I mean, which again is like one of my big concerns because there's absolutely a chance here that none of your current second line, Zacha, Mittelstadt, Arvidsson, are second line solutions for you moving forward. Like, there's a chance that none of those guys are good enough to play on your second line whenever you are ready to contend again. You better hope one or two of them are. Like, you need that. Because to just rebuild an entire second line on the fly, and again, Hagens will be part of it. He's going into the top six in the next year or two.
Thought of Zacha, like I think of Zacha as a solidly, middle six, but like second line guy. I think he's
he certainly had been his first 2 years. Last year was not good enough.
Yeah, I think of him as having the best chance of competing at that level, but we shall see what Mittelstadt brings as well. So,
one last comment from you guys before we go, because how could we not congratulate Bruins legend Tyler Johnson on a wonderful NHL career, two-time Stanley Cup champion. I obviously made the joke online because the NHL put out a graphic of all the teams he played for, and I think for 98% of his career he played for Tampa. At least he played a full season with the Blackhawks, but then the Bruins he played, what was it, a handful of games in the first half of the season before getting released. But they had to put their name on the group project and get that A.
Well, and he mentioned them. They made it into his announcement. So
wow, there you go.
Said he loved his time here. Who knew?
Who knew? All right. Thank you all very much for submitting your questions. Bridget and Scott, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Nope, I'm good.
I'm good.
All righty. Once again, thanks for your questions. Keep submitting them all summer. We have plenty of episodes, at least twice a week, for the next couple of months before training camp even begins. So heavily look forward to you and relying on your guys' participation as well. So thank you all very much for listening. and we'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.